I am here with Mari Nishitani, and Mari has written a wonderful article for us that ran a couple weeks ago about her experiences over in Nepal, working or studying, I guess, a couple of different women's cooperatives, and I was very excited to read that article, and yeah, super excited to talk to you about your trip over there and what you learned and what you saw. So yeah, why don't you just introduce yourself, and just how you ended up in Nepal studying these co-ops.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me. I'm Mari, and I am an undergraduate student at Pomona College in Claremont, California. It's in Los Angeles County. I'm also an international student from Japan. And I got an opportunity to study through school's program in Nepal for about 5 months. Between February of 2025 to June. And the program was very focused on cultural immersion and language learning, intensive language learning. So at the end of the program, for 1 month, students choose their own topic and conduct independent research project. And I picked Women's Cooperative. And the reason was I was already very, very interested in cooperative in the United States. I was maybe past 1 or 2 years, I got I started thinking about and learning about community ownership, first from internship at Community Land Trust, and then it really grew my passion and excitement for learning more and more about solidarity economy or different economic organizing. And then this summer too, I actually worked in cooperative development field in Denver. So I was like, what is the role of cooperative in global South, especially in Nepal?
Great. Had you been involved with cooperatives, or did you know anything about co-ops when you were in Japan? It sounds like not there, because the I'm probably going to pronounce it wrong. Saikaku cooperative, I think, or something like that. But no, okay. So you weren't involved at all with co-ops in Japan, just when you learned about when you came to the U.S. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, sorry. I just wanted to ask, because we've got a member who spent a lot of time in Japan working with co-ops there. So
yeah. I would love to learn that cooperative that you mentioned, though. I'm starting to learn a lot about history of co-op in Japan recently. So yeah.
Great. So, all right. So back to your story here. All right. So you want to learn about co-ops in the global South, and went to Nepal. So
yeah.
So how did you the two cooperatives that you ended up writing about in the article? How did you get connected with them?
So my research had this theme of comparing cooperative, that is, one is heavily invested and formed by NGO, and the other one is more self-organized. So for the self-organized one, I just looked up a lot on news outlets from Kathmandu that's published in English, and I found one. And the other one, at the Priya Cooperative, I contacted one of the INGO that works in cooperative development, and they had very, very extensive list of cooperative and evaluation of how each of them were performing. So they kind of assisted me into choosing one out of literally I think it's 30,000 cooperative exist
just in Nepal.
Yeah.
Wow. And to excuse me, So to clarify for people, because the last time I was in Nepal was 2016, and I hadn't been there for a while, and I wasn't really involved in co-ops before when I had been to Nepal. And so when I got there, my friend Robbie, was asking what I was doing for work now, and told him I was working with like different types of co-ops, and he was like, "Oh, cooperatives," and he just was very kind of poo-pooed it because in Nepal, or at least his like understanding of co-ops are what we would call, I guess, credit unions, something like that,
Mm-hmm.
financial cooperatives. That was like when he said cooperative, it was always just a financial cooperative of people, pooling their money and making loans in some way. And they had a really bad reputation
Yeah.
for often being corrupt, or whoever the organizers like running off with the money or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
It was funny though, because when I asked him, so you don't use one of any of these cooperative, credit unions? He was like, "Oh, no. Like, what do you do?" And then he proceeded to describe something like a susu, like a collective savings, rotating savings,
Mm.
that his community does. So he described
Yeah,
this other type of co-op, system that they had. But
true.
so these, like when you said 30,000 cooperatives, those are probably all these kind of like
Yeah,
savings cooperatives, right? Yeah.
definitely. Yeah,
Multi-purpose cooperatives, they're often called, I think.
multi-purpose, definitely. Yeah, your friend is right. I think that's one thing I learned as soon as I started like learning about co-op and people's perception there. People often associate cooperative as credit union or money lending or financial institution, and it is correct that there's a lot of corruption there. Um, Definitely, like NGO has been working in kind of providing more like transparency and less of like political influence on this cooperative, and actually like make it more like organized by community member who have the intention to develop the community. But I was specifically interested in livestock or agricultural management cooperative. So I
Mm-hmm.
specifically chose one that focused on those. But all of the co-op that I worked with also was doing the money lending service too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and I was kind of trying to figure out where you were. It seems like maybe you didn't just stay in the Kathmandu Valley, right? You were in Lamjang, is that it? In
Mm-hmm.
Gangtok province, or is that, yeah? So, um, yeah, just kind of, I guess maybe give people a little bit of an idea, um,
Mm-hmm.
what the geography is like, what the how
Definitely.
many people are living in these areas and stuff like that.
Yeah. So both of the I specifically chose places that are rural, but how rural it is, it's really different across Nepal. Some of the places it takes like 6 days by walking or something. So I chose rural places that are accessible within 1 day by public transportation. It took about like 6 8 hours both of the place from Kathmandu, um, and both of them were kind of like mid hill. So the geography in Nepal is like southern part is pretty much like jungle, and then there are like extensive like mountains in the middle, like most of the part, and then northern part there is super high Himalayas. So um, one of the reasons why I chose like mid hill area is because northern part Himalaya region have NGO and like foreign like international development have very specific interests in those regions and have very different like economic conditions that are more like tourism based. Whereas where I lived, both of the places there were almost no like tourism. The source like income didn't come from tourism, so they really had to rely on other source of income, and that has been the big challenge for rural area communities across Nepal. So I wanted to see what the cooperative role is. And then both of them had access to market, maybe by car to, it's not a big market, but middle to small, like a town, by maybe like half an hour to 1 hour by car. So that is just like characteristic of these two villages, and it was there were multiple ethnic groups living in the village. Mostly there were some Christian communities, but mostly Hindu religion groups. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and yep, that sounds very similar to where I spent a lot of time, just in the Himalayan foothills there. So yeah, so you were at these two different co-ops, and you do a really good job in the article of kind of contrasting them and how they functioned. Yes, why don't you just start with maybe like you do in the article, with the one that was funded or by the NGO.
Yeah.
What were they doing, and what were your interactions with their members like?
Yeah. So NGO funded one was called Atipuria Cooperative and BMUD in Tanahu district. So a little bit about, so I started the comparison of both cooperative from like kind of foundation, how this cooperative came into being, because it really was different. And then for Atipuria Cooperative, so initially it started from INGO staff coming to the village and getting connected to this young farmer in the village, and kind of telling and giving an idea about cooperative and how it could bring benefits to community members. And NGO member also contacted other women and started like giving some idea of like, why don't you start cooperative? And the way you can do is start gathering women to collect some money little by little. And the people who agreed with this vision started creating like a working group of, I think it was like 20, 30, 40 women. They initially used a system called Mela, which is a farm labor sharing system, where you kind of have, friends or relative, kind of sort of, whose farm you're going to help. And if you go to help their agriculture work, they will in turn come to your house and you're working your farm work. And initially it didn't have like compensation through money, but in recent years, because money has become very important thing, sometimes you can ask for money instead of receiving maybe like food or like tea as compensation, or like alcohol. So women used that, like in addition to their like normal mela, they went to more people's mela so that they get like compensation, and that kind of was the initial like money to start lending. And then the lending and NGO was focusing on goat farming, so they taught a lot of like good skills and better management for goat farming, and a lot of like equipment and different resources to build like hat, for example, or seedlings for good nutrition for goats. So women were focused on using this money that they collectively created to start goat farming for income generation. And one thing I realized is, when I talk to these women about why did you start cooperative, they often their conversation became all about this NGO. Like their response was like, oh, like why did you start cooperative? And they would say, yeah, like NGO told me to do so, told me to form a cooperative. And or some of them who managed to get a little deeper would say something like, yeah, we didn't have very good goat management, like we weren't taking care of goat well, so they helped me do better in goat farming. But I felt like there was something that was missing, which is like they were not really aware of what this cooperative is for, in terms of it is for women's like better well-being, like economic development and community people's life, which is more than just NGO or more than goat farming. And
Hmm.
this became very clear when I started to realize the goat market has been so saturated that the price was going down, and people started kind of abandoning all this like economic activity like goat farming in general. There used to be like a lot of women who had like 20, 30, 40, 50 goats, but a lot of them now have only like 5 or 4. So, and this is not just like market changing and women kind of losing means of like income, creating income, but also they there was also a big issue um, like how much Nepal has been going under change right now, and women not being able to adapt to it was a big part that I saw, because NGO has been giving another income generation activity, like why don't
Hmm.
you start like turmeric production or tomato or like cucumber production, but none of
Right,
them,
but it was all coming from the NGO, not from the
yeah,
women
and none
themselves.
of the
And
women were, yeah, taking up that.
yeah,
Yeah.
and did you get to see any of the, I guess, like meetings or any kind of the decision making process with that NGO? How those happened?
Um, with the NGO, no, but I did go to multiple meetings of the cooperative.
Or for the co-ops,
Yeah,
I guess, yeah, yeah. How did the co-op make decisions for itself? Like, were the women involved in the decision making very much
yeah.
at all?
All of the people, I want to emphasize it because in the article, I kind of critique about the co-op, but like those women do amazing work.
Hmm.
They
Oh yeah.
make decisions that for themselves. They choose committees. Um, it's about like 20, 25 people, and there are multiple committees. One that I went was like looking into financial kind of health of the co-op. So in the meeting, women were elected for that year gather for like 3 hours, open the open book management book and see who got money and whether this money is like this woman who lended me money is like giving back, things like that. Definitely, I think if you have been in Nepal, you know it's different from like working culture in the States. So definitely a lot of like for 3 hours of meeting, maybe like 2 hours of it, it was like just connecting with each other and just chatting and having fun.
Hmm.
And maybe 1 hour they would talk a little bit and
Yeah.
just make sure that things are in place. They don't really necessarily like. I think Nepal people are not in general like so opinionated that like they don't always like raise points and all the stuff, but there was definitely like that meeting was a good place to keep each other accountable and making sure that all the women feel like they have a place to like raise their voice.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. The project that I was involved in, it it was a mixed gender, like the board group,
Mm,
and that in that didn't work very well. So and as you can maybe imagine, only the men spoke. like
Yeah.
during the meeting, and they all spoke at the same time. I mean, I'm not, but you know, in kind of like almost stereotypical fashion, if you spend a lot of time in Nepal, like everybody's talking at
Yeah.
once over each other, and the women didn't say anything. So I was, you know, it's like, yeah, interested to see, you know, how that dynamic works when it's just the ladies in the room and you
Yeah.
don't have to worry about the guys there. But yeah, it's, I guess, not surprising that it's still, you know, I think because it's a very social culture, you know, and you've
Yeah.
lived with these people for generations of families together. You don't, you know, keeping everybody happy and not, you know, being overly critical, I think is important. You know, that's
And
important.
I think the importance of women has been maybe the time you visited is different from now. Now, like in the village, all the men were gone for
everybody
to work outside. So
everybody's in Kuwait or Palau or something.
Yeah, women really have to take the leadership role and really contribute and kind of come up with how to, like, what to do with this community.
So you say that you know the women, it was the women who were involved in the co-op who were making the day-to-day decisions in the co-op, but it was the NGO though who was kind of making suggestions or guiding stuff, I guess. I mean,
I think as long as I understand cooperative that I saw in Adaptability Cooperative, the NGO funded one, didn't really have like a bigger vision. For example, if now the goat farming is not doing well, I think COP should be able to kind of organize so that they start thinking about what is next or what can we do about it. But I think it was NGO that was doing that role. So NGO will be kind of like looking at the situation of the village and be like, hey, like I can give you this machine so that you guys can start turmeric production. But no one really, like there were like one or two people who were using the machine, but it wasn't the solution that came up from the community.
Right. So we might say like the NGO was doing the more of the kind of strategic planning, and the women would run their things on their own, but it to the extent they were doing. Okay. So tell me about the other cooperative in Daki district.
So Milijuli Cooperative is in Lamjung, a village called Dubar village. And this one was started by this lady. And I'm forgetting if I said her name. But anyways.
I can pull it up right here. Yeah, you do at the very beginning because you were on her commute. Lamaya? Oh, I can't hear you. What happened? Oh no. Hold on for a second, Mari. What's going on? Talk. Can you speak? I'm not seeing. In the bottom left, your little picture should have green dots when you're talking. So it's not picking up your microphone because you were talking and I didn't see any green dots down there. If you're seeing the same thing on, what's going on? Let me make sure. Yeah, my speakers are still working. I lost your mic though. Still can't hear you. Oh, there we go.
Can you hear?
It came back.
Okay.
Yeah, all of a sudden it came back.
Sorry.
Okay, no, that's fine.
Yeah.
So yeah, Lal Maya.
Yeah. So Lalmayaji is a founder of the cooperative.
Lalmayaji, that's good. Yes, I like that. I'll just point out, yes, G is what you put on the end of somebody's name to show respect. And
Yes,
so
to show respect. I have too much respect for this woman.
Mm.
So Lalmaya Ji is, it's important to know that she is Dalit, so she's the lower caste. It's called in Hindu religious system, it's the lowest caste and kind of have been discriminated in multiple ways, and still there is like a caste-based discrimination that's pretty prevalent in Nepal society. She saw in her own village that she grew up this issue of the poor and the rich, as she put it. She, especially the issue she saw was that the rich people sometimes give money, like lend money to the poor, but the interest rate is too high for poor to just do anything, and it never allowed the poor people in the village to get out of that negative cycle. And she learned about this idea of cooperative and money lending services that's not extractive from, I'm not sure where, but she learned, and as soon as she learned about this, she started talking to her friends. She convinced 9 of her friends to start advocating for this idea in a broader area. So she involved, this cooperative is not just one village, but across 5 villages nearby. They started kind of going directly to these villages to talk to the community there and convinced them to join the efforts of making cooperative. I think she was emphasizing how like it took like 2 hours on foot just to go to this village, and really, really like grassroots efforts. And after a couple months, she managed to gather, I think it was like 45 women, and each of them were making working group in each of the village to start collecting money. And similar to Atipuria Cooperative, they started money lending services, and the community member were able to start their own like goat farming or different like enterprises. And one thing that was very different in Dubar village is that I saw very diverse enterprises. The scale was very big, was still big, while Atipuria Cooperative, Bima village, the enterprise has been shrinking, but this village, the enterprise was still expanding, and the kinds of like livestock, like there was chicken for eggs and meat, and there was sheep, and goats. Both of them had like 70 sheep and 70 goats, which is very, very significant. One of the family was able to even employ 2 people, which is very like, it shows that it's pretty successful. There were also 3 big like red pepper like production, and also cucumbers, people like family selling cucumber and tomatoes and stuff like that. So the entrepreneurship that I saw in the village was very, very like interesting compared to the other villages. And I started really listening to their stories, their like narrative of how this cooperative started, and that was also interesting. The founding member and other members who are like pretty active in that cooperative was able to articulate really well like what this co-op is for. All of them said it is to really for the poor, for the woman to successfully develop this village, which is very different from Atipuria cooperative member who was like, why did you start cooperative? It's because of NGO, it's because of goat farming. So that was like a very big difference that I saw, that felt like because they know ultimate goal is to develop the village and have good life for these women, they could come up and they could integrate so many different solutions and so many different like enterprise, not just like being hyper fixated onto this goat farming or just listening to what NGO suggested. And yeah, I wrote in the essay about the Millie cooperative also had very unique way of like they also talked about how they self-organized field trip across Nepal. So going to other villages that had successful enterprises, and I felt like that. I met in the village multiple people who started their own enterprise after visiting and seeing the successful enterprise, and I think this kind of new way, like there, I saw like how the potential to be very active learner and change maker through this kind of like field trip, rather than in Nepal. In these villages, there's so many trainings happening from NGO or from local government. It's just a thing that has been very, very common for a woman in daily life to just go to this like workshops hosted by this NGO or that local government. But these classes or workshop, I don't know how to put it, but are not very effective in my view. Even no matter how many of these like learning opportunity there are, women aren't really taking actions. And I also like went to these workshops hosted by local government or NGO with my host family, and I could see how, on the back of the class, women were just falling asleep and or chatting each other. In one of the class, there was this really cute baby, so women were just like passing this late baby and just having fun. Obviously, everybody seemed very bored. So like inviting instructor kind of from outside and kind of giving all of this knowledge definitely did not seem effective anymore.
Yeah. So that's great. I mean, so you had with this group not only starting their own enterprises, but also organizing their own education for themselves, and doing tours. That's really inspiring, because it's been a decade since I was there last, and the last time I was there was 2015. I was right in the Kathmandu Valley, although in kind of outside in a farming village, but I was trying to find other cooperatives, and I didn't have very much luck. And I found one that was more of an NGO run one for Tibetan refugees in Kathmandu. So that's very inspiring to me personally. Like, okay, that's great that there's some real cooperativism going on, and that that's coming from the grassroots, and not surprising at all to me that they'd be really good at doing it, because that's why I fell in love with the country largely, is because just the culture itself was so cooperative. Like you were talking about the women, going to somebody would come and help you with your land, and then you'd go send somebody else to help with their harvest or whatever. Like how my friends, I have a lot of Tamang friends, and that's how they in their villages, it's organized like that. Like for the harvest, every day on the calendar of the harvest is somebody else's day, and every family sends either, I think, 2 people or 200 fees per person if you can't send somebody so they can hire somebody else, kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
So exactly what you described, the same thing is, and so yeah, it's it's great, and it's great that women are doing it, because I certainly saw plenty of patriarchy. That was one thing that I often butted heads with even my good leftist friends, my Marxist, Maoist adjacent friends who were still very patriarchal. So yeah, that's great that to hear an organization that's doing a lot, and yeah, run by yeah, by the women and low caste women. That is like super
Yeah.
inspiring.
Mm-hmm.
Makes me I'm very jealous right now. It's like, geez, I want to go back now. I need to start like now. I know where I need to go visit next time. Now I have a contact that you can put me in touch with these some folks maybe.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's great. So what else should I ask? What is there anything that you didn't get to put in the article, or you felt like you had to leave out, that you'd like to include?
Like, I started thinking more about how I actually want to go back to Nepal, and I see a lot of potential in this kind of self-organized like field trip as a way of creating more agency in women. And one of the things I started thinking about is how domestic tourism has been becoming like pretty popular now. And
Mm-hmm.
I was living, but there is still a lot of constraints now. Like upper caste, upper class people, as well as young people, have been going on a trekking, for example, that used to be only for foreigners. And I feel like thinking about how tourism has been very dependent on foreigners, but there is more potential to create more economy through domestic tourism. That could be a positive impact of like creating a more field trip, or like kind of intercooperative like connections across villages. As well as, like you mentioned, how patriarchy is still very, very, very prevalent, and those middle class women or lower class women, it's still not quite possible. Not just because of financial barrier, but because their husbands or mother-in-law, father-in-law will kind of expect you to just stay and doesn't let you go out, except for like very specific like religious or like ceremonial reasons. So it could be like one way to kind of break that barrier. I just remember my host mother. She's like upper caste and upper middle class woman, but every weekend when her husband go out with his friends, she was complaining all the time about how she can never leave her house. But the TikTok and all the Facebook stuff has been becoming so popular that every time she sees like her friends or like people who look like her get to like travel across, she gets very jealous. That's like very, very like fair. So I think, you know, just I just wanted to share that, like, I really see this kind of field trip to be another way that NGO can start kind of like changing the way, education has been.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds to me like some of these. I'm sure a lot of NGOs working in Nepal and other places would do well by taking a field trip to Durbar village and and taking some classes maybe from Lalmaiji and cohort. Yeah, but yeah, so yeah, educational tours. Yeah, that's interesting on the domestic tourism thing, and especially what you mentioned with the social media, because of, I don't know if you've been following the news, but what is going on right now? Yeah, they, the the parliament had blocked several, or they put a law into place, some kind of registration law for social media companies, and Facebook and TikTok, I think some of the big ones didn't um, go along with it or didn't comply, and so were banned. And now the Parliament building, I think, was on fire. I saw, and
Yeah.
the former prime minister and his wife got beat up, and um, yeah, it's anyway. Probably don't need to get into all of Nepali politics, um, but. But yeah, the social media, very powerful. I mean, that's what I thought. This with cell phones. I mean, before we even had smartphones, just with cell phones, that technology was so much more life changing in
Yeah.
Nepal. Like when I went there in 2001, the first time, everybody just had a landline. I mean, not everybody had a landline. Nobody had a landline. Nobody had anything. If you wanted to call somebody, you went to the tea shop where they had a phone, and you would call the tea shop in the village where you were trying to get a hold of the person, and they would send the boy from the tea shop to go find the person you were calling, and they would come back, and then like 5 minutes later they'd
Wow.
call you back at your tea shop, and you'd get a phone call. And that's so when they got cell phones, like you can imagine in the in the villages in the foothills, like what that was like before mobile phones. And then when they got those, it was like, wow, this really changed a lot of people's lives. And it sounds like probably the same with social media, when you can see like, oh, here are my friends or people I know out doing stuff, posting stuff on social media. Might have a little bit of a revolutionary effect on the culture.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds like it
Yeah.
might already be. So, um, yeah. So,
Yeah.
I mean, how it sounds like, so obviously you haven't been able to overcome all of the issues of patriarchy, but did you see any ways that the women were specifically trying to address any of that cultural stuff?
Yeah, definitely. I think mm, I think women because of, again, as I mentioned before, because a lot of men has been out of the village and even out of the country, women, there's just needs for women to take up the leadership. So in the local, so Lalmayaji is also local, how do you call it, local, like, municipalities member. So she
Mm-hmm.
does a lot of like political work and does a lot of service for our community, more than just as a public sector, more than just cooperative. And now I don't know when this policy has came into effect, but now municipality level, they have to hire like certain amount of women, certain amount of lower caste members. So
Mm-hmm.
I think there'll be we will see more and more women um definitely, yeah, being the change maker of very, very rapidly changing status. Yeah.
Um, I'm wondering, so, in your article, you contrast these two cooperatives, and you kind of end with kind of a call to NGOs to, maybe uh, change some of their practices around this, or, to be more empowering. But I'm wondering, did you see any other grassroots efforts, like I'm sorry, I'm blanking on the name of the
It's okay.
cooperative, Millie Mealy
Really,
Julie.
Julie? Yeah.
So had the Mealy Julie cooperative inspired any other like grassroots cooperatives in other places?
Mm,
Did you hear about any of that? Or I mean, you said they're a network throughout the villages, so obviously they're operating. But
yeah.
has anybody, other organizations been like, oh, that's a good idea, we should do something like that?
I don't think so. I think that's like one challenge. I wish these
Mm-hmm.
there should be more spotlight onto this amazing successful cooperative to inspire others. There is only one article about them, currently, and I think definitely she's popular among her like district municipality of like how successful she is. But yeah, I I think that's like another thing to connect those cooperative is very important because there are like multiple cooperative that's not as successful as hers,
Mm-hmm.
and almost every village has cooperative in some sorts, but people sometimes don't know what this could be, how well. A lot of them just fail, and that's one aspect of like NGO coming into the village and kind of forcing to make when there isn't that much motivation from the village. It tends to fail as well. So
Yeah.
yeah, something to like internally motivate.
And there are so many, internal dynamics. That's what I found out. And even though I was just like brought in to help raise money from a project that local people were doing, one thing I realized was like, I mean, just like here, it's very multicultural society. Like there's so many different ethnic groups and caste groups and language groups in one small area that it's like there's so much that you can't know if you're just an NGO that's
Yeah.
coming in like, hey, we know how to have some information about raising goats or something. Like the internal politics and all of that stuff, is it doesn't make any sense. It makes sense to me that it would be, because of my experience especially, like it's almost impossible to come in from outside and know enough about the people who you're trying to work with to be that effective. Whereas the people who are there, like they know everything because this is
Yeah,
where they're from, and so
exactly.
they can be so much more effective.
Yeah,
Um,
because
yeah,
Laramayaji knows like every single person in her village, which is like maybe 400, 500, maybe
mhm,
even 1,000 across different villages. She knows every
yeah,
single person, what they're up to and everything. So,
yeah.
yeah, right. I have to leave soon, but
Okay, yeah. It's been great talking. Thank you so much for
yeah,
spending your time, and hopefully we can do this again maybe after you write your
yes,
next article. Which I
yes.
don't know what it will be about, but I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you so much. It was like such a pleasure to share my learning. It's just like when you're like in school, you sometimes question like what are you studying for? Like I'm studying to, share the knowledge and actually make a change. So this felt
Yeah.
very um that yeah.
Yeah, no, it's great. I mean, that's what we're here for, is try to, be a microphone and a megaphone for people to like, here's something cool going on that more people
Yeah.
need to know about. So this
Yeah.
is totally one of those. All right. Well,
Thank you
I'll
so
let you
much.
go. Thanks a
Yeah.
lot. Bye.
All right.